All right, good evening, everybody. Peter Marzano back with my first sports video that I made in a while, and I've kind of angled this channel towards album reviews recently, which I think I'll continue to do. I want to review a lot more albums within the future, especially during these summer months. But some big news out of the NBA, definitely the biggest story since the Golden State Warriors expectedly swept the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA Finals, and it revolves around one of the league's best players, that being Kawhi Leonard, who only played 9 games in this past season. And a big storyline throughout last season was about his relationship with the San Antonio Spurs. And what was really interesting about that dynamic is you have Kawhi Leonard, somebody that's a very quiet and reserved man who doesn't really speak out a whole lot, but was dealing with an injury, and how that injury was handled was met with quite a bit of controversy with the media and with fans, and has seemed to cause a rift with his relationship with the San Antonio Spurs. So when you have a quiet, reserved player like him in an organization that has had a reputation for really being able to hold on to the guys that they draft, always having a great relationship with their players, having a system with arguably one of the best coaches of all time in all of professional sports, and somebody that's always able to get the most out of everybody that's on their team. And a couple of days ago, numerous sources reporting that the 26-year-old star small forward wants out of San Antonio, which is really interesting, in that apparently the biggest rumor is that the Los Angeles Lakers are his preferred destination, but there are, of course, other potential fits for Kawhi Leonard. The LA Clippers have also been mentioned, along with the Boston Celtics, who reportedly actually made an offer for Kawhi Leonard at the trade deadline that was obviously declined. They are expected to make another offer shall he become available. So that's something to kind of look forward to, is that potentially the Celtics will be in on that as well. The Philadelphia 76ers have also been mentioned as a fit, and because of the large amount of draft picks and young talent that they have, the Sacramento Kings have also been thrown into that conversation as well. But this is a huge story of the offseason. Of course, this is going to be the second straight offseason where we have a lot of big stars on the move. Of course, last year, Paul George being traded, Kyrie Irving being traded late in the offseason, having Chris Paul being traded as well. A lot of big movement and a lot of teams looking to complete what they had going on from the year prior. So this offseason, of course, the big story is revolving around LeBron James's free agency, which, of course, we're still quite a bit, I wouldn't say quite a bit, July 1st is when that begins, but trade can happen at any time, and it's really interesting leading up to the draft what may be happening here in the sense of Kawhi Leonard. So with the Lakers being rumored as his preferred destination, which makes sense because Kawhi Leonard is a native of Los Angeles, you have to kind of look at what the Lakers are able to do if this is something that they want to pursue. And while the Lakers don't really have a lot of star power, at least current NBA star power, on the roster, this is certainly something that they would like to pursue, along with, of course, pursuing fellow LA area native Paul George, who has certainly shown interest, at least remnants of interest, in playing for the LA Lakers. And he's a free agent this offseason. And, of course, the LA Lakers actually being the Vegas favorite to land LeBron James as well, which I think a lot of that will have to do with if the Lakers end up getting Kawhi Leonard or not. So, of course, it's not a set thing that he's going to be truly available, and I'm sure the Spurs will do everything that they can to salvage a relationship with their star player. But this is certainly really interesting, and there's certainly a lot to unpack with this. But I think the biggest thing to unpack is the fact that the LA Lakers, looking in the sense of forming a trade, don't really have a package that's going to fit very well with what San Antonio has. It's not to say that the Lakers don't have young talent that they could be willing to move, because they certainly do, but it's not anywhere near the young talent that the Philadelphia 76ers and the Boston Celtics or even the Sacramento Kings have in their arsenal, and they certainly have a lot more to offer in that regard. So there's been a lot of stories about what the Lakers can potentially do. And, of course, the Lakers, with their trades that they made at the trade deadline, cleared up enough space to be able to sign 2 max contracts this offseason, which of course they would ideally like to have Paul George and LeBron James. So if they're able to do that, and assuming that they want to hold on to Lonzo Ball as well, the biggest trade chip that the LA Lakers have, or I should say two, center around Kyle Kuzma and Brandon Ingram, who are both players with very high ceilings. Of course, Kyle Kuzma kind of emerged as surprisingly the better rookie on that Lakers team last year that had a lot of ups and downs. Of course, they didn't make the playoffs, but Kyle Kuzma certainly looks to be a high ceiling player and somebody that the Lakers could potentially move for Kawhi Leonard. And then there's, of course, having Brandon Ingram, somebody that's been on the team for a couple of years, has a really high ceiling, but hasn't really proven to be that great of an NBA player so far. So those are a couple of things that the Lakers have to consider. But I think when trying to form a trade to garner somebody of Kawhi Leonard's, of Kawhi Leonard's, I don't know what word I'm trying to use here, of his status, of that kind of player, of having somebody that is often regarded as one of the best players in basketball when healthy, somebody that's also 26 years old and already a seasoned veteran, an NBA Finals MVP, a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year award winner, and somebody that has the capability and has done it before of dropping 25 points every night while picking up the toughest assignment on the other team and being the best player on the floor 9 times out of 10 when he's playing. So the Lakers, assuming that getting LeBron James and Paul George is going to be their number one priority heading into free agency, this is certainly something that if they're able to make a deal with him beforehand, that would really bolster their odds. So, of course, one thing to look at, and I'm going to pull it up here just so I don't misspeak and know what all of these teams have as far as draft picks go, I should say. But the Lakers, because it was not a top 2 pick, did not get to keep their pick. And that ended up going to the Philadelphia 76ers, who picked 10th in this year's draft. And the Lakers, on the other hand, are without a first-round pick. The highest pick they have in this year's draft is actually the 47th overall pick in the second round. So the Lakers, as far as draft picks go, don't really have a whole lot to offer, which is something that the 76ers and the Celtics could certainly also throw in. The Sixers having a good 10th overall pick in this year's draft, which is certainly something that they could trade. And they have a lot of young talent in their arsenal. Of course, I would view Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid to be untouchable, but it's also worth noting that the 76ers and even the Celtics had been in the conversation for potentially acquiring LeBron James. And the Celtics next year have a first-round pick a high first-round pick that is not theirs, that they can utilize in a trade. And I think if you're analyzing young talent, nobody has more than what the Celtics have to offer. So the Celtics could put together a myriad of different packages that would probably be able to get them Kawhi Leonard if that is something that Kawhi would be interested in. The Celtics could trade Kyrie Irving for Kawhi Leonard. I wouldn't rule out that being a straight swap, with both of them having 1 year left on their deal, and with Kyrie Irving being rumored quite frequently to be interested in playing for the New York Knicks, as he's somebody that went to high school in the area and has kind of expressed interest last year in the offseason after he made his trade request to play for New York. So that's something that heading into the free agency in 2019 is kind of to be expected. But if the Celtics do not want to part with Kyrie Irving right now, which I don't expect that they would, they have a lot of other talent that they have to offer. They have Terry Rozier, they have Jaylen Brown, they have Jason Tatum, who I really doubt would be moved. But they also have a 27th overall pick in this year's draft. They have the pick next year. So they still have a really large arsenal in what they can offer to be able to get Kawhi Leonard. And I also wouldn't rule out potentially trading Gordon Hayward for that, because they have a surplus of small forwards, having Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward, 3 really all-star caliber small forwards that they could really include in negotiations with the San Antonio Spurs to try and get Kawhi Leonard, especially if Kawhi truly does want to leave San Antonio. And I also find it hard to believe that San Antonio would make a trade that puts them in a spot that wouldn't at least have them in the playoffs. What also makes this interesting is that if Kawhi is really set on going to Los Angeles in general, the Clippers have the 12th and 13th overall pick this year in a draft class that is notably strong. Actually, I misspoke there. The Lakers have the 25th overall pick in this year's draft, but I think it's certainly worth noting that the Clippers have the 12th and 13th overall and are also kind of noted as a dark horse to try and make a play for LeBron James as well. So that's really interesting. But I also think is interesting is that the Sacramento Kings want to throw their name in the hat. And while Sacramento is far from the ideal destination for an NBA star, they have the 2nd overall pick in this year's draft, which could be Luka Doncic. It could be, that's who it's probably going to be, but it could be a number of other players. And they also have a guy like De'Aaron Fox. They have Willie Cauley-Stein. They have a lot of young talent on that team that's, while mostly unproven, they could include in a trade, especially with having that high caliber of a pick. So I do think that if Kawhi Leonard is going to get traded this offseason, I almost feel like it's more likely for that to happen prior to the draft than afterwards, just because the teams that are going to be interested in him and are interested in him have draft picks that would certainly increase their chances of being able to get Kawhi Leonard to their team. So that's certainly really interesting, and I'm really curious to see how all of that plays out, but especially because Kawhi has kind of expressed interest that the Lakers would be his preferred landing spot. But if you're looking at draft picks being a part of that equation, which Lakers would almost certainly need to include if they're going to try and make that trade, even if they were to include Lonzo Ball in a trade like that, it's certainly going to need to include a Brandon Ingram and a Kyle Kuzma and a draft pick. The Lakers would have to give up a whole lot more in order to get something that San Antonio would be willing to take to part with Kawhi Leonard. But there's also the question mark about Kawhi's injury that he suffered in the 2017 playoffs. And while he came back for 9 games last year, he certainly didn't look like the Kawhi Leonard that we've been used to seeing. And then he was cleared to play, never ended up coming back. There was a big controversy about him working out with his uncle in New York, being away from the team, and kind of this growing disconnect that started to happen between the Spurs and Kawhi Leonard, which is just really interesting and different because that's not something that you usually see with a franchise and organization like the San Antonio Spurs. So that's what makes this a really unique situation. But I do think that the Lakers are going to put everything on the table to try and get Kawhi Leonard, an LA native, to get there. And I think if the Lakers are going to be the team that ends up getting Kawhi, I really think that they're going to try and make a move within the next 5 to 7 days prior to the draft so that they have him already there going into free agency. And then that makes it almost, I wouldn't say surefire, but it makes it very, very likely that at least one of Paul George or LeBron James is going to go there and join another superstar, especially in the context of LeBron James not really having a great opportunity / place to go as it is right now. If he stays in Cleveland, there's not really a whole lot there to build around, especially as he's heading towards, at least we would think, the twilight of his career, with him entering his 16th season and his age 34 season. So that's certainly something to think about. And LeBron has better opportunities to begin with than staying in Cleveland. There's possibility he goes to Philadelphia. While the Celtics have been thrown on the table, I very, very highly doubt that that would happen. Not just because Kyrie Irving's there and that's kind of become his team and something that he's really looking to seize the opportunity of next year, especially with Gordon Hayward presumably coming back if he's not traded for Kawhi Leonard, that is, because you just never know what happens. But I highly doubt that LeBron's going to go to the Boston Celtics. So I think that as far as making a trade, it's going to be really interesting. And I think Sacramento is certainly going to make their offers. Are going to include De'Aaron Fox, who, while didn't have the greatest of rookie seasons last year, certainly showed flashes of brilliance and is a very high energy player and somebody that I think you can expect to improve, especially once he gets more playing time. And there's also a player on the Sacramento Kings named Skal Labissière, who was a top prospect in the nation when he was in high school. It kind of lost a little bit of steam once he went to Kentucky and got drafted a little bit later. in the first round than many would have thought he would have been after being a 5-star recruit in high school. But I think that's somebody that can really, really be a very strong NBA player. So I would not at all rule out De'Aaron Fox, Scala BCA, and that second overall pick. I think that's probably enough to get Kawhi Leonard. They could probably throw in something else as well if they need to, just because Sacramento is in general a tough sell. But then if you're the Kings, you're putting yourself in a situation to where you're wiping out all of the other talent you have besides the person that you acquire, who you're not even sure if he's going to be completely healthy or not. So that is, I think, the biggest concern is that what Kawhi Leonard are you getting? Nobody really knows for sure. We haven't been able to see him on the floor for a consistent amount of time since the playoffs last year. So a lot of question marks in that regard. But I think if we're talking about a trade, the Boston Celtics have the highest amount of possibilities and the largest amount of packages that they could put together that would, on paper, be able to pry Kawhi Leonard away from the Spurs. The only question is, with his preferred destination being somewhere else, which I think could certainly be compromised with the amount of talent that Boston has. And I think if you were to get Kawhi Leonard, Kyrie Irving, and Gordon Hayward all on the same team, which would certainly require the Celtics parting with their draft picks and one of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and certainly Terry Rozier as well, that would probably make the Celtics certainly the favorite in the Eastern Conference, especially if LeBron James ends up going to the West, which a lot of people certainly expect. So I think that'll be really interesting. Just a whole lot to unpack. I'll probably make another video updating this situation once more news comes out, but just kind of wanted to dissect what each team that's interested and kind of what they have to offer if they're going to be trying to get Kawhi Leonard. But this is certainly news that I think if you looked 14 months in the past and you saw that headline, it would have been really, really mind-boggling. But that is the state of the NBA we're in. But I will say this, if the Lakers are able to put together a package to get Kawhi Leonard, I think it's very reasonable to expect that at least one of LeBron James or Paul George will be heading to the City of Angels to join him. But just want to talk a little bit about that. With Peter Marzano, I'll probably have another album review Monday night, maybe. I got a busy few couple of days. I don't know. That didn't really make a whole lot of sense. Busy few days coming up. I'm going to try and have another album review up and then probably talk about this and then make a video after the draft as well to unpack everything that happens there, especially with DeAndre Ayton and Luka Doncic looking to be the top 2 picks, Phoenix Suns with the first overall pick. So that'll be really interesting and fun. And, of course, the NBA awards following shortly after that. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you for tuning in. It's been Peter Marzano.